This video is for students looking for some modeling of the skills and practices found in Day 4 of Unit 4 in the United States History and Government curriculum, which focuses on the question, what caused the United States to go to war against Spain in 1898? In particular, I'm going to focus on demonstrating how the language of causation and consequence tool will help you write a short essay question, which we abbreviate SEQ, about a cause and effect relationship between two documents, which is basically one of the two tasks in Part 2 of the U.S. Regents exam. So if you are taking that test, this is going to be especially helpful. So let's start at the beginning. To develop our understanding of the historical context surrounding the Spanish-American War that we need for that SEQ at the end of this lesson, we're going to begin by examining these three primary sources, and for each one, we're going to try to come up with a potential cause for the outbreak of war between Spain and the United States. And I have two pieces of advice for you as we do this, and I'm going to pull up the first one here. First, clicking on this link that all of them have will take you to an external site where you can see a larger, higher resolution version. And by the way, for this first one that appeared in a Spanish magazine originally, that site is also going to provide you with English translations of the words you see here in the event that you cannot read Spanish. My second piece of advice, and I'm going to show you on this next cartoon, which is pulled from an American magazine, is to really break down and analyze these images as you try to determine any clues about potential causes of the war. This is especially important if you don't happen to have already a lot of knowledge about this event or time period. And if you were going to do this, I would recommend you use the see, connect, and infer protocol that you see right here. I'm not saying that you need to go as far as write them all down and fill this whole thing out, but at least do it mentally as you look for these clues. I know the focus of this video is the language of causation and consequence tool, so I'm not going to get into too much detail here about how to analyze these images. However, if you see the modeling that I just displayed, I will let you know that I did start by dividing this cartoon into 4 sections, which guided my observations and helped me not miss anything, and I recorded what I saw here. Then, and I'll move this up here, then I made an inference about the artist's message or purpose, and finally I connected it to a larger issue. If you do need some support with this, feel free to pause the video and you can use my model, and you can use all this as a model for your first one, then try the other 2 images on your own. And if you would like some elaboration or modeling of how to analyze a political cartoon, there is a separate video available that you can check out. After using these 3 sources to come up with the potential causes of the war, you'll watch this video that gives you an overview and furthers your understanding of the historical context of this time period. And you're going to use all of this to respond to these questions that will check your understanding before we move on to the next part. Now that you should have some pretty sound historical knowledge about this, let's move on to the next section where you're going to practice and sharpen your skills regarding causation. And to do this, we're going to rely on the language of causation and consequence tool. An electronic version is embedded into the slides that follow, or your teacher might provide you with a PDF version. For this video, I'm going to pull up that PDF version because I think it's going to be easier for us to see. To really help you advance your skills, we're going to be using this tool twice. First, with a source that we just saw earlier in this lesson, and second, with a new one that's going to go and provide you with numerous additional causes, and some of which you're going to classify as long-term, some as short-term, or you might even find some triggers in there. All of which is really going to add to your understanding of this conflict. So I am going to be doing a think aloud modeling of the first one, then I'm going to give you the opportunity to try the second one on your own. Okay, so we see here the image of the wreck of the USS Maine that we actually looked at earlier in this lesson. And again, to see a larger, higher resolution version of it, just click on this link. And if you still think you need a little more information about how this fits into causing the war, I would recommend clicking on this link and then reading the short explanation that appears below it. Now, we need to be thinking to ourselves, what words or phrases can I use to explain how this event fits into the causes of the Spanish-American War? Well, earlier in this lesson, I learned how immediately after this American ship exploded in Havana Harbor, newspapers made this their top story, which led to public outrage and put pressure on President McKinley and other members of Congress to act. Even without concrete evidence, what we refer to as yellow journalism ran headlines claiming that Spain was to blame, and it really steered the American public to demand revenge. This story dominated the headlines for weeks, and it directly led to the declaration of war only 2 months later. So another question that I need to be asking myself is, Does this show an immediate, short-term, or long-term cause? Then I'm going to decide which words are truly appropriate for me to use. I'm going to switch over to the language of causation and consequence tool, and you can see that I already circled some words and phrases that I'm considering, and I'm going to walk you through my selection process. So I know from my previous work in this lesson that there were actually several causes leading up to the declaration of war. Some we can classify as long-term and others short-term. However, the sinking of the Maine, regardless of what actually caused it, was the event that made the war inevitable, and it was declared within 2 months. That means the words I want to use should reflect that this was an immediate cause. A common phrase that I could use is because of. For instance, the Spanish-American War happened because of the destruction of the USS Maine. However, this is really generic, and it really doesn't convey that amongst all the other causes, this is the one that directly led to it. So I'm going to keep looking. In this category, the noun category, the word spark caught my eye. Could I say something like, the destruction of the USS Maine was the spark that led to war? I could, and to be honest, I do kind of like this, but let's keep looking because we might find a better one. Honestly, I found that most students do either pick verbs or adverbs when discussing causation, which makes sense because I think that we do naturally kind of tend to lean that way. And there are a few here that I want to consider. First, what about the word influenced? Yes, for sure, the sinking of the Maine influenced the US declaring war, but does it really inform my reader how immediate of a cause it was? Definitely not. Usually when we think of influence, it's either passive or done over a long period of time, and I think influence is a better word for a short or even a long-term cause. And led to, which is another popular one amongst my students, I think it falls into the same category. It doesn't let my reader know that this was like the straw that broke the camel's back, even though there were all these other things going on at the time. Now, what about this word triggered? How does this sound? The destruction of the USS Maine triggered American entry into a war with Spain because yellow journalists sensationalized the event and blamed Spain. I really like this one because it implies that, yeah, there was other stuff going on, but this is what set the whole thing off. It was immediate. And I do think it is just as strong as the word spark that we talked about earlier. So it is your choice as the writer. You have creative license. And I think I'm going to settle with the word trigger, and I might even use this sentence starter here to assist me. As you get better at this, you'll probably be using these sentence starters less and less, and just selecting transitions, nouns, adverbs, and verb phrases to supplement your own writing style. And here's what I came up with. You'll see that I also did include a direct reference to the document itself, which is something that a good historical writer does. So now you're going to try this on your own with this secondary source, and you're going to create 4 statements about why the United States fought in the Spanish-American War. As you go through the reading, you are going to take note of immediate, short-term, and long-term causes and categorize them here. Then, just like you saw me do, you're going to use the language of causation and consequence tool to find those words and phrases that really reflect the type of cause that you're picking, and that's going to help you construct these 4 accurate statements. And also remember, this is your chance to be creative. Once this is done, you are definitely prepared to tackle that final activity of the lesson, combining your content knowledge with your freshly practiced causation skills to write that SCQ about the cause and effect relationship between these 2 documents. The first, document 1, is from President McKinley, and the second one is from that cartoon from that Spanish magazine that we saw earlier at the beginning of class. And remember, you can refer back to your previous work in this lesson when you're writing the historical context, but when you're discussing their cause and effect relationship of these 2 specific documents, you will be focusing more on those documents themselves.